Greetings, my fellow Outlanders, or should I say, Avedonians. As you venture into the Wildlands, you may run across a unique challenge, known as the Dungeon of Time, if you are so lucky enough, or should I say, unlucky enough. Today we will be reading an excerpt from the Dungeon of Time book. This book was written by Erik, all 198 pages. Today we will be reading the introduction as well as the history excerpt from this book. With that, my friends, sit back, grab yourself a beer, and enjoy your time. Hail to thee, traveler. My journeys as a scholar have taken me much further afield than I had ever imagined them taking me back in my early days as a student of the Lyceum. A certain amount of travel was certainly expected in order to study the strange and curious, but instead of crossing oceans and visiting wayward islands, I have crossed the turbulence of time itself, and the islands I have visited were different worlds entirely. When the Avatar slew Mundane, thus shattering the gem of immortality upon the ground, countless new worlds sprung into existence within the plethora of the shards. I've devoted my life to traveling through and chronicling these worlds. Some are so similar as to be nearly indistinguishable from another. Others are so disparately different that thou likely wouldn't recognize them at all. And so, when I learned of a world called Avedon, a world that lies within a shard closest to the dying Mundane as to absorb more of the fell wizard's essence, I had to make my way there and investigate it myself. But before arriving in Avedon, my travels led me to another place entirely, a place wholly unexpected and unlike anything I have witnessed before. This place was all at once familiar and completely foreign to me. I've seen countless iterations of the worlds that fabled Avatar once roamed, and this place was all of those and none of those all at once. In one room, I saw where the Avatar defeated the demon machine Exodus. In the next room, I witnessed the founding of the Abyssal Colony by Sir Cabrius. To my left were the gargoyles seeking the false prophet. To my right was the cursed wizard Tibble and his brother Garamon. Bits and pieces of the familiar world and familiar times converged in this place and existed in such a flux that vortices appeared out of the ether, which tore at my body and mine when I was too close. As I explored these myriad times, it became clear that this place was some sort of a convergence of worlds at different times, as if a handful of shards of the gem of immortality were randomly picked up and crushed together into some malformed shape. This was the underworld, the Stygian Abyss, Shadowguard, Britannia, Avedon, and so many other places all at once. You can stroll from the Virtue Chamber where the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom awaits to the Erat plagued by the Shadow Lords. In between is even the last iteration of the Abyssal Colony. As I searched this place, I discovered so much more lying beneath the surface. Quite literally, in fact. Descending through a massive hole at the center of the abandoned second colony brought me into a dark vista floating into a nebulous, murky expanse. Powerful things dwelled on this plane, and part of the purpose of this text that I write is to share my observations with thee, dear traveler. Knowledge is perhaps the most substantial tool thou can bring to the ready against the denizens of this place. That and runic magic. In my explorations, I discovered a number of stones with old runic symbols that reminded me of the runic magic I became familiar with in one underworld of many. However, the ones found here largely have different effects. I will endeavor to detail my observations of these as well as further within this guide. My wandering took me deeper and deeper into this antediluvian abyss. I avoided confrontations with the tears that lurked in every shadow to the best of my abilities, until I came across the citizens of the colony that was abandoned on the levels above. They offered me shelter and succor, much needed respite from the hostile environment I came to know. I learned that these people were descendants of the colonists who settled above long, long ago. They were forced to flee time and time again, each flight moving deeper into the abyss until they established this last colony. Their tale warrants a chapter of its own, to be quite honest. After many days, or possibly weeks, of exploration, of which the details will be written below, I decided to ascend the levels and attempt to find a way out of here. Up and up I trudged, through traps and treasures, mysteries and monsters of all manner, until I discovered a way out. A way out into the realm I had sought. Avedon. And so I am here, penning this tome for thee, O intrepid adventurer. Learn all that thou can of this place, for although it holds the greatest dangers I have ever seen, it also holds treasures beyond imagination, questions in need of answers, and mysteries upon mysteries. Read on, for adventure awaits. And now for the history. Much of what I have learned about this dungeon referred to by its more hospitable inhabitants simply as time. I did so through both observation and delving through the rather desiccated library located in the last colony. This knowledge came from many generations of scholars and explorers. Most of what I have puzzled together is perhaps merely theory and does not reflect reality, but reality is hard to discern in such a place. From what was written by the resident scholars of generations past living within this abyss, they believe this realm to have sprung into existence at the time of the Great Shattering. But, unlike most shards of the Gem of Immortality, this one was formed by smaller fragments that somehow melded together with the waning energy of Mundane. It is perhaps the fading magic emanating off of the deceased evil wizard's body that fused these small fragments together. Of course, nobody can prove this, and it is mere speculation, but it seemed as good a theory as any that I personally could devise. The following is a recounting of the origin of time as told by several of the colony scholars who have since been lost to the Great Abyss. In the ancient days of this abyssal realm, there came a powerful wizard known as the Timekeeper. It is said that he came from another world, much like myself or even thee, dear traveler. But he is said to be the first person to encounter this convergence. How he came to time in the first place is unknown. During his explorations, he saw a great void, a place where all times and all worlds converged. And in that void, he saw the potential for great power and knowledge. At first, the Timekeeper explored the dungeon alone, learning its secrets and unraveling its mysteries. But over time, his exploration drew the attention of entities from the darkness beyond, the vast emptiness that stretches infinitely. They came in great numbers. These entities were attracted by the powerful magic that the Timekeeper wielded. They were creatures of the abyss, born of chaos and darkness, with twisted forms and malevolent intentions. They were agents of entropy and decay. Their very existence was anathema to life. At first, the Timekeeper was able to fend them off with his vast magical abilities, but as more of these creatures began to converge on the dungeon, he realized that he was not powerful enough to hold them at bay for long. And so, the Timekeeper began to build a fortress in the heart of the dungeon, a place where he could study the convergence of times and worlds safely from the threats of the entropic creatures of the abyss. He worked tirelessly for countless centuries, using his magic to reshape the very fabric of the dungeon to his will. He created great barriers of magic and enchanted traps to ward off the terrible creatures who sought to breach his fortress. And as he worked, he discovered even more powerful magics, secrets that allowed him to bend time and space to his will. Using his power, he created new lands within the abyss that connected to other realms, beyond the few shards and into other, more structurally sound shards. But even with all of his power, the Timekeeper knew that he could not hold out against the forces of entropy and decay forever. As the power of the Timekeeper grew, so did the power of those that emerged from the Linky Abyss. It was then that he discovered what drew these creatures here. Traveling through a strange dark land with no name, the Timekeeper came across a blackened skull of deep and evil power. The skull was immense and swallowed the very stars around it. Greater and greater evils emerged upon this discovery. It was the true skull of Mondain. His flesh rotted away, staring into the shattered remnants of the Gem of Immortality. Eventually, the Timekeeper's defenses were overwhelmed and his fortress fell. The Timekeeper himself was lost to the darkness, along with most of his research and notes. However, though the Timekeeper was the first, he was not the only person to ultimately discover some way into this convergence, as I can personally attest. In the countless generations since his fall, others have entered and explored the abyss. Few ever returned to their worlds, but it was enough for a colony to eventually form in the upper reaches and preserve to this day. With the fall of the Timekeeper's fortress, time was left in a true state of chaos. The intrepid creatures freely roamed through the dungeon, attacking any who dared to explore its depths. The convergence of worlds and times that once very long ago held such promise became a dangerous and deadly place. Many adventurers and scholars attempted to make their way into the dungeon to discover the secrets that the Timekeeper had uncovered, but none ever met with success.